Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Velato. We've got some more mailbag questions to hit before the draft night comes, and we wanted to get to all your questions. So hopefully at the end of this third mailbag, pre-draft mailbag, we've gotten everybody's questions. So let's get right into it, Nick. And it comes from Jason Metz, who says, quarterback, wide receiver, offensive line, those are all fine and good. But more importantly, what's on the day one draft night food menu for you guys?
Food menu? I haven't even put any thought into that. Absolutely zero thought. Zero thought I put into the food menu.
Terrible. You got to have good food prepped for draft night, Nick. You understand getting into it that from 6 p.m., 7 p.m. locked on until 3 a.m., you're going to be in one place watching the draft on your, on the social media, checking that too. Then we're recording. It's a long day. It's a long night. You've got to be prepared with food. You don't want to be caught off guard. So for me, I know exactly what I'm doing already. I am going to be heading to an Italian deli I love, and I'm picking up 2 sandwiches, not one. It's always important to have 2, a backup sandwich. The first one, it's going to be obvious. It's chicken cutlet. It's sharp provolone. It's prosciutto. A lock as those 3 on a sandwich. May throw some roasted red peppers or something like that on. It's an Italian sandwich. The second one is where things get interesting. Okay. I don't know exactly which deli I'm going to go to yet. There's a bunch of Italian delis around here, and I like a lot of them. But one of them has a really, really interesting sandwich that I'm going to get into in a little bit. I don't want to get into that right now because I don't want to spoil it just yet. I'm not sure I'm going to go there, and I don't want to put that name out there. But definitely that sandwich as one, and probably definitely a second sandwich. Don't know what that's going to be yet, but Italian deli over everything. I like a good turkey provolone with lettuce, tomato, onion, oil, and vinegar. It's great. I like it, Nick, but I'm not going to choose that over Italian deli because Italian deli has the meats and cheeses that I like and the bread, to be quite frank. So that's what's on my menu. And I'm going to buy some bags of chips too, Nick, because I'm an idiot who eats like crap and doesn't care about it.
Nah, you're not an idiot, man. You do you, you do you. You have fun. You eat whatever the hell you want. Just be cognizant of what you're putting in your body. Maybe exercise temperance every now and again. But I mean, yeah, you do you, bro. I just haven't put any thought into it, and I'll get something. Dude, Dan, I got to ask you this before we go on. Have you tried Pliables? I'm pretty sure we've talked about this, but have you tried Pliables?
So I know you're a huge fan of them. Obviously, I know that.
High in sugar, but they're I do like them.
But definitely some fruit and good stuff in there for you. I have not tried it yet. I'll be honest with you, Nick. I don't know the time I can get a Pliable. Like it needs to be like a treat or something for me. Like I would never do that as a meal personally. I should.
It can act as a breakfast.
Okay. The problem is I don't eat breakfast. That's probably why I never had Pliable. Like I intermittent fast until lunch every day. So maybe one day I do it as like a treat or something. That's what I have to do it as, like take an edible that night. I'm in the mood for kind of sugary treat. Nice, and I just go out to Pliable right before it closes and get one. Because a lot of people like them. And there's like one right by where I live. So at some point I will try it and get back to you because I know you love it. And so does you and Diane are big fans of Pliable. Used to be, that was a big thing for you. So one day I will try that.
Wired Celery asks, good pod, guys. Not sure how to feel about the possibility of Shane Daboll getting almost a pass on this season due to uncertainty at quarterback. We'd be 3 full seasons in with no clear direction. I understand Mara wanting to have more stability, but when is enough enough? This is a good question.
Great question. And it really has come to my mind. It's just such a tough, complicated, loaded question to unpack. We're going to try to do it here. But, we're recording this on Thursday, the week before the draft, and Joe Schoen had a presser. And look, I don't want to read too much into these things, Nick, but I did get the feel from him that he felt like very resigned about the quarterback situation. Like it sounded to me like he was just like, look, we're not going to be able to trade in division. So rule out number 2. Number 1's Caleb Williams. And he sure sounded like he feels confident number 3 is going to be the Patriots staying there and taking a quarterback. And it didn't really sound to me like he wants the 4th quarterback in this class. It didn't sound to me like he wants to trade up. Now he still might. He might be, faking it to the media. He should be probably giving some misdirection, but it wasn't about what he said, Nick. It was about the tone and the feeling about it. It didn't feel like he felt good about and confident about getting the quarterback he wants, I should say, in this draft. And I do really believe he wants a certain quarterback. I'm not going to say who I think that. I mean, guys know who I think that is, but I'm not sure that's a definite thing. But I really do feel like for what Brian Daboll wants to, And for what Joe Schoen wants him, he went to 6 of his games this year. It's Drake May. And I feel like he felt like he's just resigned to the fact that he won't be getting Drake May. So that happens. Let's say the Giants don't get a quarterback, Nick, because Shane also said something really interesting in today's presser. He talked about how if you're taking a quarterback outside of round 1, the bust rate, the hit rate is so much lower for that position. He admitted that. He said that. And he said, what I'm looking for if I'm getting quarterback outside of round 1 is a good QB2 that can be a salary cap break for me. He talked about how when you sign Tyrod Taylor or Drew Lock as your QB2, you have to allocate $5 million or $10 million with Taylor's case, cap space to that. And if you get the quarterback in the round 2, 3, 4 in the draft as your QB2, you save some cap space there. So to me, it sounded like it's very possible, Dak, wired salary, that they might not get their QB and they might go into this thing with Jones and maybe Drew Lock, maybe DeVito, who he also talked up. And then it gets to the point where, look, if the Giants have another struggling season with Jones, which he's had in 4 of his 5 seasons as the starter, they might be in a position where they're right back where they started next year. And then what do you do, Nick? Do you give them more time? Do you want to provide some stability? And it's tough because I can preach process all day, Nick, but at that point, like the Giants have lost a lot of games with this group, Shane and Daboll at that point, and they're nowhere closer to me to getting back to Super Bowl contention at that point. They wouldn't be, at least without the quarterback possibility. So, and I think no matter what, I'll just be honest with you, Nick, Daniel Jones getting cut next offseason. I think there's almost no scenario where he's back on the roster with a $50 million cap hit and that injury history that
unless he takes a pay cut.
He'd have to take a pay cut and in addition to that, a massive jump in his play. Like we'd have to start to see him throwing for like 275 a game every now and not even every now and then, like average 250 plus as a passer at minimum, average 220 plus as a passer at minimum. This guy's averaging like 200 passing yards a game in his career. Like it's just, you can't pay $50 million in cap space to that, especially when you might take away the running long-term based on the ACL, or at least the ceiling of that. So it's a weird spot, Nick. I don't know what to say. I really don't have a good answer for this. Do you have a more strong answer? I'm kind of tossing my hands up right now on this one.
I don't want to toss my hands up, but I don't think we could sit here before this draft and accurately assess this question. Look, when the Giants made the playoffs in 2022, that bought Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen a lot of cachet. That bought some time, but the subsequent season was an absolute disaster, Dan, like an absolute disaster to the point where it might have removed everything that happened from the 2022 season. I'm with you, man. I trust Joe Schoen from a process standpoint, and I can see a scenario, unfortunately, I know they're kind of linked at the hip, and I don't want this to happen, but if we have another season like last year, especially with the coaching turmoil and Brian Daboll kind of having a couple lapses on the field, and also at the press conference just being a little bit not as crisp as he was when everything was going successfully, right? And then all the whole Wink Martindale situation. If that happens again, I could see him being the scapegoat to this Joe Schoen possibly being put in a position where he can select another coach. But I think a lot of this also depends on who is available. I mean, we've heard Bill Belichick's name be linked to the Giants, or at least him say that he would be open to coaching the Giants, but he's also like, 75 years old, or he would be at that time, 74, 75 years old.
Right.
So I guess I'm right with you. I don't have a great answer for this, but I also don't think we're in a position right now to assess it, because I think this is like a week by week basis once the season rolls around.
Fair. Let me say one more thing on this before we move to the next question. I will feel, okay, if the Giants, let's say they lose a lot of games next year, Daniel Jones is just not good, and then they just bench him because they don't want to have the injury clause kick in, and so they're playing Drew Lock or maybe DeVito at that point. They're losing games at that point, right? We can be sure they're not going to win a lot of games with those two quarterbacks, but they might win 6. They might win 7 like they did last year, or 5. If they're in position again, Nick, to draft a potential quarterback, I am personally going to be pro Daboll, because I still want, like, I don't want to fire Daboll and get in some defensive minded coach, or get in some kind of coach that I'm not positive can develop the quarterback. Because to me, the only thing that matters to me is getting this quarterback position right. I think once you do that, everything falls into place and you start to have a completely different picture for where your franchise is headed, and an actual real true ceiling once you get that elite potential quarterback in place to mold. But you still need to then do a million things. You got to mold him. You got to improve his mechanics. You got to improve his processing, all those things. You got to have the right guy to do that. Sorry, go ahead.
No. It's okay. I just want to say, man, like, you just kind of gave the answer a little bit ago, in my opinion, right? Like Drake May, he went to 6 of his games. He wasn't going there to watch Tez Walker.
Right.
He was going there to watch Drake May. They are 3 picks probably away from getting Drake May if Drake May does go 3rd overall. It just seems to me like that would be the solution.
Well, it is, but it may not be possible if the Patriots like Drake May, and that's the problem. Or if
Exactly. It may
Washington
not be
takes Drake
possible.
May, which is not at this point,
Yeah.
with the Jaden Daniels stuff, who knows what's going to happen there. And that's an issue for what they like, the Giants. But, say they don't get a chance at drafting Drake May, then it becomes down to me. Like, I would still want Daboll here because I would want him to mold the next quarterback. But Shane is the one where while I love his process, Nick, if we don't start to see some tangible results from guys like Azudu and Cordell Flott and Evan Neal, and even we need to see one more jump from Thibodeau, because yes, I like what Thibodeau's seen, but now with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns on that line with him, he should be feasting. Like, he should get a lot of one-on-ones and he should be paying off on those one-on-ones. And we need to see something even a different level from him. So it is on that too. Like, the guys that he's drafted need to make a jump this year, Joe Schoen.
I want to jump to this question. It's a little out of order, but it's from John May IRL. Thoughts on Daboll calling plays? I think it pertains to this exact conversation.
It does pertain to this conversation. And, I've always said the ideal scenario is you get the John Harbaugh type coach, the guy who doesn't really overfocus on either side of the ball. So he's very in tune with what's going on in game, and he's making the right decisions on challenges. He's making the right time management. He's making the right fourth down calls because he doesn't have to worry about getting the next play call in. But with that said, I like Brian Daboll's past as a play caller. I think for me, it might come down to as simply as this. If they get a Drake May type talent, a explosive vertical thrower like May, or Jaden Daniels to that extent, because I think he could do some of the stuff he did with Tyrod Taylor, I would be more open to Brian Daboll calling plays because I like the fit if he has something like a Josh Allen type talent to call plays for.
Ultimately, you want to have your head coach manage the entire team and not just the offense. But the Giants under Shane and Daboll have put a huge emphasis and focus on bringing in analytical guys and situational front office is probably the situational coaches that are up in the box to help assist Daboll. So I think there could be a transition if Daboll does not like what Mike Kafka is doing. I don't think it's an ideal situation though.
Okay. Casey Hust asks, I own a small store where we feature new specialty pizza each month. I'm so happy. This question's right up my alley, Casey. Thank you for asking it. What ideas do you have for great specialty pizza? Some examples I've had are Philly cheesesteak, brisket, chicken parm, bacon pickle, chicken speedy. If either of you stop in, you get a free one. Oh, I love that too, Casey. But Casey. I got ideas, Casey. So I want to hear yours. If you have some first, Nick, go ahead.
So I always go with like the boring, just barbecue pizza or the buffalo chicken pizza. I need to sit here and spitball in my brain some really specialty ones. Man. Like all the other ones are a little bit like overdone now, like, bacon and ranch and stuff like that. So I know you're going to be on top of this a little bit more than me. And I've talked long enough to allow the thoughts to percolate around your head, Dan. So take it away.
This is all top of head, by the way. I'm just thinking of this is my kind of brain. So I'm starting with your first thing you get going is a chicken cutlet, prosciutto, pizza. You get that going right away. You start to turn some of these great Italian sandwiches into pizzas. The next one you could do is a chicken cutlet, balsamic, mozzarella, and roasted red peppers on it. You throw that on. You start to get that going. So now you got two right there. Now you do an Italian roast pork. You do Italian roast pork, like you get it to Nick's, sharp provolone, and broccoli rabe. That's your third specialty pizza. That's three right off the top of the head that I love. You know what I'm even interested in? Let's turn this thing around. Let's do something interesting. You gave me an idea. How about a bacon? I've never seen this. A bacon, egg, and cheese pizza. You do bacon, egg, either fried egg, or you could do like soft boiled egg on there. Something interesting that plays well that you put on post bake of the pizza, bake of the pizza. So those are four ideas just right off the top of my head. But I really want to stress how good a chicken cutlet prosciutto pizza sounds to me. Like that's the one I really want.
What about like chicken marsala and chicken franchise pizza?
I've seen those. So okay. I think those are good. I've had one of those before. They're good. They don't play up as well on a pizza for some reason, but they are good.
Have you ever had penne alla vodka pizza?
Great pizza. Yes.
Great pizza.
I mean, look, you could also do the DeVito. You could turn the chicken parm, the chicken parm twist, which is chicken parm, but with vodka sauce, which is amazing. You turn that into a pizza because I've seen the chicken parm pizzas, but how about the chicken parm vodka pizza? Now you got another one.
Casey also asked, and those were great examples that were in that.
I got more. I just got to think. You just got to give me time to think, and I got more.
All right, I'm going to ask Casey's next question. If you have some other ones while we're answering the next question, maybe you can run through it. But Casey also asked, was not trading Barkley and McKinney at the deadline a Shane blunder? Ended up getting nothing for them unless, the Giants get the comp pick, and potentially would have lost more games without them, resulting in a higher pick and better shot at the quarterback they want.
Yeah, it's hard to say because franchises operate so differently. Like I would tell you my take my head out of the game, take my heart out of the game, I think it would be a mistake because I personally agree with everything you said. You get them off the roster, you get back a pick for sure. And honestly, I hate to say it, but more importantly, you lessen your chance of winning games, which might have put the Giants position right now where they can get their Drake May that they love, or they don't have to trade up and give up all those assets to get the quarterback they love. And that's a better position for your franchise long term. There's really no argument to say otherwise. And you could say, the other side of that, which is no matter what the argument is, you have to win these football games during the season, even if you're out of the playoffs. And I understand that too. But so my head says, yes, you're right. My heart says, this is not how the Giants operate as a franchise. So what's the point of getting too worked up about it?
I'm right there with you. I don't know how much Mara has to say about this. I think he has to say a lot, especially regarding Saquon Barkley, a little bit more than McKinney. But with Saquon Barkley, yeah, if you could have traded him and collected a 3rd-round pick and lessened your chance to win football games, it is kind of admitting that it's a rebuild. And I don't think John Mara and the Giants want to do that mid-season. But Casey, I mean, if we think about this, you're correct, right? Like, the Giants would be in a better position right now if they were to do that. I think they're just going to sit there, though. And Shane has already mentioned this, Dan. Like, oh, well, we wanted to work on getting them a contract. No, you didn't. I don't think. I think you had your number out there for Saquon, and maybe you held out that he would capitulate and there wouldn't be a market for him. But guess what? There was. The Eagles came in, scooped him up in no time.
Big Blue Rich asks, when was the last time you or Nick took a day off from social media? Great question.
That is a great question. Whenever I go on trips, I usually don't really look at social media much. So I was in Puerto Rico about 3 months ago before like draft season really started up. So that was probably the last time. I should do it more often though, because social media could be poisonous at times.
It's very poisonous for your brain, mine included. I was just talking to Nick before this podcast about somebody saying something defaming about me on Twitter. That was a lie as well just now. And then I had to just go off on this person. And Nick's like, why do you do this? Why do you care about these people? I'm like, I don't know, Nick. It's a problem that I have. I got to discuss it with somebody. I don't want to discuss it with you. I don't want to put that burden on you. So I'll bring it to a therapist instead. But I don't like when people say BS about me that's not true. And it just bothers me so much that I respond. But I need to stop that. But last time I took a day off was actually recently, which is nice because I'm the same as Nick. Whenever I go on trips, I'm really good at taking off from social media. If I'm actually off from work, sometimes I'll do trips while I work on the trip. So recently I went to Costa Rica for a friend's bachelor party, and I did not look at social media that entire time, which was really nice. Really, really good to take off from it. So, and it's funny to me, Nick, because like social media for me is just two platforms. It's Twitter for work and for that, and I'm on that all the time. And then it's like Instagram when I'm just killing time looking at my phone. And I don't actually post anything to Instagram. I have like 6 total posts, but like I just like, follow like golf accounts and golf tip accounts and things like that. So I'm just like mindlessly watching videos and stuff like that.
And when you're scrolling through Twitter, is there a lot of this going on? So stupid. All right, let's get into the next question. Mar_R asks, do we really think Shane is ever going to give anything away when talking about the draft? He is way too good at this part of the game. I think the only thing worth reading into is who they have for their pre-draft visits and who they are sending to pro days. Even with the pro days, I could totally see him using that to throw people off his scent. He's like no one we ever had in this job before. He actually knows what he is doing. I would contend that Ernie Accorsi.
Ernie Accorsi, yeah.
And George Young.
Yes, and before him was George Young for sure, who changed the game as a GM. But Ernie Accorsi as well, just a phenomenal GM. I mean, like Shane, great from a process standpoint and cool guy, but Ernie Accorsi, I mean, he brought in the greatest free agent class in the history of the franchise when he brought in Plax, Antonio Pierce, and Kareem McKenzie in one offseason. Just insane, and bought low on 2 of those players. Like, found Antonio Pierce way before he became who Antonio Pierce was. Somehow Kareem McKenzie was cheapish on the market, got him. And then the Plax thing was weird. He's coming off that weird kind of end to his run with the Steelers, and he bought there too, and was another just great signing. And in addition to all the draft things he did in the draft, trading up for Eli Manning, assembling that offensive line, Richie Soybert,
not giving up O'Hara.
Yeah, not giving up OC, also drafting OC in round 2, like scouting that one out. Justin, I mean, like he was to me the best GM that the Giants have ever had. But Shane, you're right. You're right what you're saying. Like we discussed at the top of this pod, his presser and how I felt like it was kind of somber and he kind of felt resigned to the fact that he's not getting his quarterback. But maybe he's doing that on purpose, honestly. So the Vikings are like, oh, we don't have to trade up. We're not getting this guy either. So I don't know. I think you're probably right, though.
Also, man, being a general manager right now is so much different than being a general manager back George Young's time when they didn't even like have free agency
even
when he started, and Ernie Accorsi's time with social media too. Like from a fan pressure standpoint, it's a lot, man.
Big Joseph GCT asks, pre-draft, what is your overall grade so far on Joe Schoen's tenure? I want you to include draft, free agent, trades, roster. This may be his most critical draft. While the process has been improvement, at the end of the day, the results matter even more, and he may not make another draft.
I want to say he's going to, but again, like I said earlier, anything can happen, right? We have so much time from now until the end of next season. I'm going to give Joe Schoen a solid B so far. I mean, we did make the playoffs. We did win a playoff game, the first playoff game the Giants have won since the last time they won a Super Bowl. That is something. And I think we can all acknowledge, yes, the Giants weren't necessarily ready to contend for a Super Bowl that season, and they benefited from some fortuitous luck throughout the year. But still, it was something none of us expected. I mean, on this podcast, you and I, we had higher opinions of the Giants that season, but it was more predicated on the fact that they were playing the AFC South, and the AFC South sucked. I'm going to give them a solid B.
I think that's fair. I think that's where I'm at with it too. I don't want to overestimate the process. I think this is pivotal. You said it's a pivotal draft for him.
It is.
But no, you said that, Nick, and so did the Joseph. But I mean, we've also said in the past, Nick, I know you agree with me on this. We can't really evaluate a draft until 2-3 years into it. So to me, it's almost more pivotal to see where his 2022 class goes. That's the big one for me. I need to see more out of Azudu. I need to see more out of Flott, and I need to see more out of Neal and potentially Kayvon Thibodeau as well. Like that to me is the make or break for him right now. So I'll give him a B as well for now. Okay, Marcus Aurelius asks, what is the likelihood of the Cardinals and Chargers staying put given their needs? Can the Cards afford to pass on a prospect like Marvin Harrison Jr.? Can the Chargers afford to not take a top receiver? Both of these teams have their QBs paid, and both of these teams need to find their QBs an elite weapon.
Also, Joe Alt in the offensive line as well, Marcus Aurelius. So I think it's quite possible that neither of those teams trade back. If I was a betting man, I could see Monty Ossenfort, the general manager of the Cardinals, trading back. He seems to be a wheeler and a dealer. But if Marvin Harrison's sitting there, which he's going to be, you want to get Kyler Murray, that guy. So I do think he's going to sit there and get that guy. I just think in his heart, he is somebody who does like to collect a lot of draft picks. So I think if we're going to put a percentage at it, that both of those teams stay put, I'm going to say 55%.
Oh, I like that percentage. This is my whole thing. I think the whole Cardinals trading back from 4 discussion has been mostly smoke. I think when it comes down to it, they want Marvin Harrison Jr. They've been quiet about it for a reason. They're going to sit and take him. The Chargers are the scary ones to me because I'll tell you why, Nick. Yes, they need wide receiver as was discussed, but they just drafted a first-round receiver. And Jim Harbaugh is an offensive line first kind of guy. That's how he wants to build out his team. And if he looks at this class, Nick, I know the discussion is Joe Alt is OT1, but there's a lot of great OTs in this class and a lot of great alignment. So to him, he might be like, this is a great spot to trade back out of 5 because I'm still going to get a great alignment and I'm picking up assets. So that's the one that seems more likely to me. So I'll put it at 65% that one of the two makes the trade.
Bry Guy, our guy, Bry Guy, thank you so much. He asks, Shane has one glaring mistake in his process so far. As a Giants fan, I can see and understand his process so far, which I can't say of our last 2 general managers. I remain cautiously optimistic about him, but from league and conference perspective, we are really in a good spot. Are we really in a good spot with him?
From conference, or I guess maybe division conference perspective, I feel like the Giants are in a pretty solid spot there. I think the Washington franchise, yes, they got rid of Dan Snyder, but there's some question marks about some of the process and some of what we've seen so far from that management team. I think that's fair to say. Dallas, I think, is overrated and underrated in a sense that like Jerry Jones is there and he's really pushing hard, but they also have Will McClay, who's, to my opinion, one of the better scouters in the game from a drafting standpoint. And then obviously Howie Roseman's probably the best GM in the NFL. So you've got that going for you. So I don't know if I can necessarily say, Nick, that they're in a great spot. I love his process, Joe Schoen, and it's refreshing, but the picks have to hit at some point, right? Like if you're going to go ahead and make picks like Azudu and Flott, which again are going against consensus, even Wandell to an extent, which we like a lot on tape, going against consensus, going a little above the board, getting your guys, quote unquote, they got to hit too. Like it can't be like a just, things happen and these guys didn't work out. So I think really what it comes down to is these draft picks, especially from 2022 class, that specifically for me, have to start playing a lot better.
What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less, yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeau next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it. You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE system.
Adam Vitale asks, is Daniel Jones really as bad as everyone is saying? He looked terrible last year and his play was embarrassing, but before last year, I watched this guy with flashes that made me think if things came together, this guy could be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL.
Depends on your barometer, I guess. Like how are we measuring? What does bad mean? Bad is a very ambiguous term. Look, I think Daniel Jones can be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I just don't think he really has a ceiling. And if that's the quarterback that you want, then go for it. But I want a quarterback who is going to access every inch of the field. I want a quarterback who has the gumption to challenge tight windows, specifically 20 plus yards downfield. And even in 2022, we bring it up all the time, the Giants just were not doing that. They weren't doing that at all. I think Daniel Jones is a big athlete. I think he's a fluid mover. It's going to be a little bit hindered now with the torn ACL in his past. But I do think there are significant limitations to his game that are going to cap his upside at maybe the 15th best quarterback in the NFL, while also not putting the defense in a position to really be threatened with the deep pass, as we saw all last year when Daniel Jones was checking the football down. And I would even argue parts of 2022.
Yeah.
So I want someone with a little bit more upside, a little bit more ceiling than Daniel Jones. You can get away with that on a rookie contract, but now when you're making $40 million a year, you just can't have that. I think that's unacceptable.
Yeah, I think, Nick, you nailed a lot of the good points here. Specifically, like if your ceiling is only top 10, top 15, that's not something that leads to a winning division, competing for Super Bowl every year kind of deal. If you're also getting the 40, 50 million against the cap that he's getting. So I think that's the bottom line there. But I would argue that the answer to this question, Adam, it just depends on how you see what happened in 2022 and 2023. If you believe that what happened in 2022 into 2023 is the Giants created a system that finally worked for Daniel Jones, and it's a good way to go moving forward. You know, it's a lot of, some RPO, use his legs, bootlegs, try to find some occasional shot plays, but not really many, throw the quick passes, hit the underneath backside drags, things like that. And that could work again. And the reason it didn't work last year was because the O-line was so bad. Then you could probably see him being a potential top 10, top 15 quarterback consistently. If you think defenses adjusted to what they saw on tape, took it away, and he had no answer, then I think that an argument can be made that he's worse than people are saying, because you still have all the bad years before 2022. And then in that scenario, 2022 was something that can't be replicated because defenses got tape on it. They took away what was working for him in 2022, and that his skill set doesn't offer or provide any real answers once that is taken away. And that was all good and well when Daboll came up with it and Kafka, and they created it for him in 2022, but it was a short-lived thing. So that's really the debate that I think you need to have in your head when it comes to Dan Jones, because before 2022, he was not very good, not a very good quarterback. And at Duke, there were some glaring things. He was one of the lowest average depth of targets. He threw short of the sticks all the time. He didn't use the middle of the field at Duke. It was a one-read system, a lot of RPO stuff. So it's like in 2019, it looked good kind of from a touchdown standpoint, but all his games against the good defenses were terrible in 2019. And it was a half field high-low system that, again, he put some concepts on tape that he liked. Defense took it away. So it kind of just comes down to what you think of what happened in 2022 and 2023 and how much it's repeatable.
Great answer. Sean Rahman asks, is there a scenario that you would accept where the top three quarterbacks go? Marvin and Neighbors are gone. Vikings offer their 2 firsts this year and next year. Are there 11 guys you like that are comparable in value to a dude? I think we've answered a question similar to this, but if you didn't hear the mailbag from last week, yeah, me personally, I would accept that. If the Vikings come calling and say, hey, we'll give you basically 3 firsts to move up, yeah, absolutely. And I would also agree to the 2 firsts this year and Jordan Addison, which was a question we had last podcast as well.
Sure. And I guess for me, it's interesting, Nick, because I talked about it today in one of my tweets where I replied to someone. I think there's a massive drop off after wide receiver 3 in this class. I like AD Mitchell, but I had my concerns.
There's also the reports that are coming out about the diabetes, right, and just
stuff. Like the fact that you can look at his tape and see him taking off plays, and then it's like, I like a lot of these other receivers. I really do but I don't know if I think they're anywhere near that tier. So if I made that trade back, Nick, and just and look, I'll take 11, 23 in a first next year. It's just too much, right? Like, it's fine with me. And then I have my first next year. Maybe I can use that to trade up for a quarterback because I have 2 firsts. So it's just like a good thing to have. So I'm down for it. But if I do that, Nick, I'll tell you what, because I don't like any of these defensive guys at 11 at all, really at all, unless it's like Cooper DeJean, who I really like, but I wouldn't want to take him at 11. And I might even consider, I just really like this dude. I think he's an actual playmaker, but I don't really love any of the edges, to be completely honest. I don't think we need an edge. I don't really want to take Byron Murphy there. And now you're talking about what, like one of these other corners, Quinyon Mitchell or the Terrion Arnold. They don't really love it. No safety. So honestly, and again, I'm saying I see a drop of receiver, Nick, and I feel like there's a lot of receiver depth in this class. So I know I can get one either at 23 or with my second round pick because of the depth. If I pass on one of these big three and trade down, you know where I'm looking at 11 once I make that trade? It's offensive tackle. That's what it is for me. And I hate to say it with Neil. Now it's someone it'd probably be like Troy Fountain. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
No,
From Washington.
Yeah.
Who I can maybe kick inside the guard, or Graham Barton. Or Graham Barton, who moves crazy well, and maybe you consider it a reach, but it's not really. You put him on your interior, and now you got an amazing upgrade, and you could use him as a weapon in your run game and screen game if we can ever get that going. So that's my thing. If I do make that trade, I'm not looking at O-line because I don't want to. I can get receiver at any point, and I've lost already on the big three receivers at that point.
I'd be open to selecting Quinyon Mitchell, I think, at 11. And I know there's some aspects of his game that we haven't seen at Toledo. He was off coverage quite a bit. He wasn't really up in press, but the Senior Bowl, he did show press skills. And I think he would be a very good complement to Deonte Banks in this situation. But I just love the options. And I think you just nailed the point where next year you're going to have 2 first-round picks. Right. And in that situation, we don't know how bad the Vikings are going to be. We don't know how bad we are, right? Like, we need a quarterback if we don't take one in this draft. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so open to it. Daryl asks, do you think they'll become a pass-happy team depending on the offensive line? And who are the best anticipatory passers you've ever seen? For me, it's Marino, Jim Everett, and Dan Fouts.
Such a fun question here. Thank you so much, Daryl. So I'll first start by answering the question. Ideal scenario, this is what Brian Daboll wants. He wants to become a pass-happy team. You've seen it in some of the changes they've made on the offensive line. You've seen it in the investment in the skill position players, though not yet a first-round pick. They tried to last year, and they've spent a lot of mid-round capital at wide receiver, and they might spend 6 overall at wide receiver. But to become the pass-happy team, you have to have the quarterback who can operate the pass-happy offense. I don't think anyone on the roster is that quarterback right now, and I'm very confident in that personally. So the question becomes, how do you find that? So that's, to me, the answer to the first question. The second question, why don't you answer that first, and then we'll get into our anticipatory throwers.
So I think a lot of it's just going to be situational. Now, the Giants don't have Saquon Barkley, so there might be lighter boxes, and maybe there's going to be checks at the line of scrimmage to where the Giants will be running the football more. I think a lot of it is situational. I think at his heart, he does want to be a pass-happy coach. That's what he was up in Buffalo. But then again, he had Josh Allen at that time, so there's a big reason why.
True. It does depend on that quarterback. The answer is it depends on if they could get a quarterback who can operate that kind of offense.
Yeah, man.
We'll see if they can find that at some point. Now, the second question is a really fun one. I wasn't really the Marino, Everett, and Fouts are all before my time, so I'm just going to go by my error here, Daryl. So I'm going to throw some names out that I've just loved as anticipatory throwers in my era. The best that I think by far is Tom Brady right now in my era. I'm going to put Drew Brees up there as number 2 for the 2 best anticipatory throwers that I've seen since I started covering this game. Up there for me, and I think this allowed him to be as good as he was in his career because I don't think the physical tools were ever that amazing. It's Philip Rivers. It really is. And he was just a phenomenal anticipatory. Honestly, he might have even been better than Brady or Brees when you consider all the other tools that Brady and Brees had. But that's a debate, and that's something interesting. But to me, those are my big 3, I would say, for my era of football.
Peyton Manning too, and Peyton Manning might have been a little bit too good at it because there were times where he was anticipating, it's like, oh, Austin Collie will catch this, and then Austin Collie would just get his head taken. Yeah, terrible, man. Felt so bad for that homeboy.
Anyone else for you that comes to mind?
And the ones I was going to say were Breeze and Brady, and I liked your Philip Rivers call. I think that's a really good one.
Okay.
David Goodman asks, last year on this pod, you recounted numerous times when Hyatt would be wide open, but our quarterbacks would not throw it to him. So how would drafting a wide receiver number 1 help us? Wouldn't our quarterbacks just continue to not see him open? I question whether it is a good team building strategy, basically, to draft a wide receiver before the quarterback.
Great question, David. I'm happy you asked this. I'm happy we finally get to answer this. I know you've been asking this before, not in all mailbag context, so I'm glad we do. So for me, it's not like the answer to your question could be, yeah, that could happen again. We could have wide receiver getting open, not getting the ball. But this decision for me is not about what happens in 2024. This is a decision about hopefully what happens in 2025, 2026. If it all works out and my evaluations of these wide receivers, these big 3 wide receivers are true to what I see them, this could be a decision that matters for 2020, for 2034. right? You could get 10-year career in blue out of one of these guys, maybe 15. Probably not, but 10. So I'm not worried about the now. And I know this is my answer to your question, David. I'll be honest with you. Like, I agree with you, but I don't agree that it's bad team building to go wide receiver 1 before the quarterback. I think you just got to get great players on your roster, blue chip type players, no matter how you can get them, and worry about how they fit later, because the decision is not about now for me. It's about everything, the future included.
And the quarterback too. You don't want to just draft the quarterback, just draft the quarterback. I know you know that too, David, but I'm right there with Dan. I think if you need that number 1 wide receiver, which the Giants do need, you just don't think about it in 2024. You are thinking about it from a longevity standpoint. Frank Corona asks, who's your favorite realistic wide receiver target in the second round? Either someone you take at 47 or someone you could trade up a few spots to get.
Another incredibly, incredibly fun question here. So I really do appreciate that. I don't want to give away too many of my guys yet, Nick, but I'll give away one that because we just discussed him so much already. It's Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver out of Florida. I mean, look, the concern with his game is the production profile. A late breakout, right? Took him transferring to Florida to really break out, and the age. That's fine, but it's so undeniable when you watch his film. And when you combine that with how good his athletic testing profile was, that this could be a great receiver in the NFL. And not just a good one. He has potential to be a great receiver in the NFL. And so maybe the age and the late breakout does drop him all the way to round 2 at 47. I think it's very possible. And that would be my one guy that really stands out to me.
It is for me as well. There is a little bit of a concern that he's just a warm weather kid. He went to Arizona State.
Not about that.
He is a Scottsdale, I think, kid, or maybe he's Gilbert. Either way, he's from the Valley out in Arizona. And then he goes to Florida. And I think he's actually made comments that he's a little uncomfortable in the Colts. That's something to consider. He is by far and away, I think, my favorite second round wide receiver. If the Giants didn't have Jalen Hyatt, I would be enticed into Xavier Worthy. I think Xavier Worthy actually does have more wide receiver skills than people are giving him credit for, given that he ran a 4.21 or whatever. And everyone's just like, oh, he's just that guy. I'm like, I think he's a little bit more than that, right? So if I had to come up with another second round wide receiver, like what wide receiver complements his Giants receiving core in the second round very well? Like a Troy Franklin, he's the big body. I think he's wildly fluid, but he's kind of, I don't want to say weak because that's pejorative, but he can get knocked off the spot pretty easily. And he has some frustrating drops on tape. I just got done watching Bo Nix's film. And there were a lot of times where I felt like Troy Franklin didn't bail out Bo Nix on the deep vertical plane. Now, the throw wasn't great, but a better wide receiving prospect would have tracked it and probably secured the catch, whereas Troy Franklin didn't. But I'm looking at these big body guys like Xavier Legette. Is he one? I'm not 100% certain because I tend to like these smaller type, the Z type of receivers like Alad McConkey and Ricky Pearsall. Those are like the two that I think of. But the big body guys, if I had to go there, I think Brendan Rice is more of like a third round guy, maybe late third round dude.
So I'm going to say this. I know he's a polarizing prospect, Nick. I like Keon Coleman. And I'm not necessarily sure he has wide receiver 1 upside at 47 overall, but I think he's got more upside than people realize. And I like his body type, and I like his fluid. I think he's more fluid than people give him credit for. So I'll say him. You know who I'm also going to say, just from watching a lot of Penix and Odunze, I like Jalen Polk too. And I think that he could potentially be in play there at 47. He might fit what you're talking about. Like, we're just talking about fits, right? Like right now, like, because we already have the small guys. We want a bigger body guy outside.
It depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about fit, then sure. If we're talking about like who can be a wide receiver 1, who could be the wide receiver 1 on the Giants, I don't think Jalen Polk has that.
And I don't know if I think Keon can either.
Keon's interesting though, right?
Yeah, he is interesting.
Keon's interesting. I do like Keon Coleman's game quite a bit. So that goes to the Odunze question though, because if you do trade out of that spot and trade back, there is a significant drop off from Odunze to these players. I do love Ricky Pearsall though. I think he could be a one option, but he's not that commanding X that Giant fans have been looking for since forever. And they thought they got it with Kenny Golladay, and we all know how that transpired. That was terrible. Right. Okay. Sir King Bowman asks, considering that the New York Giants are in rebuild mode, what would be most beneficial in 2 to 3 years? The number 2 wide receiver in this draft or all? Please game it out. How can they fill each position going forward if the other is taken at 6?
Yeah, great question. And I know you're I think from our past discussions, you're pro the offensive line pick here, like a Joe Alt. Gaming it out, like, look, 2 to 3 years from now, let's say you take Joe Alt. At that point, you probably are just done with Evan Neal. He's off your roster. And Joe Alt is now, I guess, your right tackle. You try to have him convert from left side to the right side and hope that it goes great. These things don't always go great. It's a lot more that goes into it when you switch from the left to the right side, but you hope that he's a great enough prospect that it works. Or maybe you don't take him, you take like a Fuag or something else, like a pure right tackle there. Marius Mims, you can maybe get in there and try to go for the upside. I don't know. Now you've gone through 2 to 3 years, Neal's off your roster, and you don't have the wide receiver one, or you try to get one in round 2. The other route is you take the wide receiver here, the Neighbors or the Odunze, and you hope that your new offensive line coach can develop Neal. To me, there's more upside to that route, because there may be more downside, because offensive line is more important than wide receiver. I agree with you on that, King Bowman. You can't really go anywhere until you build the trenches out. The wide receivers aren't as important when the trenches aren't good, and the wide receivers are less important when the trenches are good. It's a vice versa thing. But upside wise, like, you're just giving up on an asset instead of having the potential of a Neal plus that wide receiver one. So I'm just swinging for the long-term upside with Neal hopefully developing into the player I hope he can be.
There are other positions and other assets that the New York Giants can use right now. Look, I'm never going to begrudge the Giants for investing in the offensive line, but like Dan said, you're kind of taking out the Evan Neal card and just burning it when there's still potentially 3 years on this guy's rookie contract and a lot of potential for this player that we have not actualized quite yet.
Brett Moore asked, with the Daniel Jones contract here for at least this year and the window with rookie quarterbacks so valuable to stock other positions while underpaying quarterback, doesn't it make more sense for Shane to go stud receiver at 6, save the resources required for a trade up, and then get the quarterback next year?
I think it does, but I think it also just depends on the conviction that this front office and this coaching staff has on the quarterback prospect. Like we've said a lot throughout this pre-draft process, if you have that type of conviction that Drake May or JJ McCarthy are those guys, and you can realistically get that guy, you need to get him in the building, because as Giant fans know, finding the correct quarterback, it can be elusive, as we're finding out. So that would be my one reason why I would not go wide receiver at 6 and go quarterback.
Brett, thank you for the question. I'm glad you asked it, because I think this is a question a lot of fans wonder and ask, not either to us or other people. And my answer to this is, in a perfect world, the answer to your question is yes, but there is no perfect world when it comes to finding quarterbacks and drafting quarterback prospects, because you could do this and then next year's class, you may win too many games. You don't have a chance at them. There may not be good quarterbacks with elite upside. So really what it comes down for me, if you're in striking range for an elite, somebody you think is an elite quarterback, you go get that player, even if you have to trade assets, because you may never be back there again. You may not be back there next year. You may not be back there the year after that. That's not how things work. It's not a perfect world. There either aren't a lot of, well, we know this because we can look around the NFL. There's not a lot of elite quarterbacks that are consistent. There's so few. We talked about Sean McAvoy. There's just bad quarterback play across the board. So it's really, you're gambling way too much, and you're just leaning on paper, a paper play. It's too much of an on-paper play to say I'll get my quarterback next year, to me.
DeSancti asks, how do you think Simmons will be used in Bowen's system? Related, how do you feel about the depth at inside linebacker?
Yeah, we've talked about this a bunch, I think, on past mailbags. We think he could potentially be in those 3 safety looks, and maybe as a, you know, I think there could be chances for him to play as a wide 9 edge. I don't know for sure, but I think it's possible. Yeah. And as far as the depth goes at inside linebacker, yeah, Nick's discussed this a bunch this offseason. He's right. Like they don't really have, per se, great depth behind Bobby Okereke, and if you want to say McFadden, who I used to be lower on, now I'm very high on, but we'll see what happens with him, and that's kind of why I'm not as concerned here. But you're right, depth isn't great there.
Rob Allen asks, why do you and Dan believe taking wide receiver 6 is a good play? Odell was great, but didn't make us a winner. We won 6, 11, 3, 5 games in his 5 years. Wouldn't it make sense to, 1, get the quarterback, or 2, build up the offensive line like redraft of 2014? I would take Zach Martin over Odell easily. I would as well. I was actually a little upset that the Giants didn't go with Zach Martin, but Odell Beckham was a hit for Jerry Reese, probably extended Jerry Reese's tenure a little bit. And Dan and I have been talking about this through all 3 of these mailbag episodes. It depends on if the quarterback is there. For wide receiver, look, I still think it's a good play. You need to find yourself a stud wide receiver for the future, for the now. And if he's available and you don't love any of those quarterbacks, go in that direction. Now, for offensive line, you may have a point, but as Dan and I already brought up, the Evan Neal situation kind of throws a little bit of cold water on that if you still think he's salvageable. And I hope that Joe Schoen thinks he is salvageable, because he's like a 22-year-old kid who has been hampered by injuries.
And I'll add this, Nick. If there was a Zach Martin type prospect in this class, I would be more open to this. I don't think Joe Alt is on the level of a prospect as these wide receivers are, to be quite honest. And I don't think any of the tackles behind him are either. So that to me is a big factor in this. And if you had that, then I'm open to it. But I don't know that we're definitely getting a Zach Martin career out of any of these guys. I think that's crazy to even say that. We should probably say that about the receivers too, right? Like, it's no guarantee they're going to be that, but it feels like a different level prospect to us.
I couldn't agree more. Bry Guy asks, I sent this to Dan Schneier too, but I don't think we read this. But should this season blow up on Daboll, will the New York Giants be in the Belichick sweepstakes? And moreover, is Nick Casario's success in Houston and Bill Belichick's failure in New England enough reason to question passing along the general manager title to him?
Look, I think I saw this in a recent interview. One, Belichick admitted to confidants he wants a coach for the Cowboys, Eagles, or Giants. I think the Giants would take precedence over all those teams, though the Cowboys could compete because they have a better roster. But he would probably love to come back here. And I also saw that he's willing to not be the GM anymore. And that to me is the deciding factor if I'm interested in Bill Belichick or not. Because I know some people have said otherwise, but I still think he's going to be one of the best coaches in the NFL wherever he coaches, because his defense is going to immediately be great. And he pays attention to every little detail. He had game plan specific there every single game. He's so on top of things schematically. But he has to give up the GM stuff for me, because I'm not interested in a Belichick GM head coach thing. It didn't work in New England. I mean, it was covered up a while from having Tom Brady. That's what an elite quarterback does for you. But you look at those drafts, man, they're just bad news across the board. And so really bad news, really, when you really look at them. So, I would think for me, Nick, it depends entirely on if he would be willing to be the head coach only.
All Things Giants asks, any plans of doing dueling mocks? Yes. We might have that episode before this, or it will be coming shortly after. Mm-hmm. Also, what players would you each personally target in each round? I appreciate your collective grind and the quality product.
Thank you. We don't like to do positions. That's not how you know this, obviously, from listening. We don't draft positions, we draft players. But we're going to get to a My Guys Sleepers episode, which will give you a good idea of who we want to target in each round.
Absolutely. Mike L asks, if we don't go quarterback at 6, I would rather them not use a day 2 or day 3 pick on quarterback and continue to build the roster. Where do you guys stand in terms of the draft, the quarterbacks? And if you had to pick a guy on day 2 or day 3, who would you like them to take?
Great question, Mike. And look, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, love it. Love the question.
Yeah, great question. And Joe Schoen said today, when you take a quarterback outside of day 1, you're really hoping he's going to be your QB2, not your QB1, which is really interesting. And he has reasons to lie about other things, but I don't think he has much of a reason to lie about that personally, but maybe he does. I don't know. Everything could be a smokescreen. So I think you might be right. Now I am more open to it than I normally would be, because I like Daboll. I like what he did with DeVito. I just think we can maybe get some juice out of one of these guys, but long-term, you're right. Like, what is a little juice now going to do for us long-term? If this guy's not an elite quarterback, he's not really worth it, and there's nothing really long-term ceiling-wise there, just to get a little bit of juice out of it and like some fun games like we got out of DeVito, but it's not great long-term. So if I had to, though, and I had to bet on any of these guys from day 2 or day 3 having an elite NFL career, no, I'm not going to make that bet, Mike. And you can make a different call here, Nick, but I don't see any type of long-term elite ceiling out of any of the day 2, 3 guys personally.
If Joe Milton is there, the Tennessee quarterback, in the top of the 3rd round, I am willing to make that bet.
I just watched 3 games of Jalen Wright for a CBS profile, Nick, and I gotta say, there are some flashes from Joe Milton, not just like stupid flashes, like he's running around with his head cut off or he bombs something. There's like some moments where like he'll roll to his left off platform, flip his hips back, and rip the ball with great ball. Like, I'm like, whoa, I was not expecting to see that out of you, Joe Milton. I thought you were a total project.
No, he's a ceiling guy, and we love ceiling on this podcast. So if you're telling me Joe Milton is there, I'm willing to roll the dice on that. You're talking about he's 6'5", over 6'5", 235 pounds, with freakishly large hands, and just an insane arm.
Yeah,
and his top comparison on Mock Draftable, this is not because of his play, this is because of his athletic ability and his size, is Josh Allen. And the next one under that is Daniel Jones. So you see that there's a big gap there, but still you get where I'm coming from. There is a ceiling there that I do appreciate. And he has shown abilities to make far hash throws way up the sideline. I don't think he was as good as Hendon Hooker, not even close to as good as Hendon Hooker in that regard, but Joe Milton still freak athlete. I would sign that up on day 3. We got one more question here, Dan. So let's get into it from Eli's burner account. Eli's burner account asks, do you think the fan base is unrealistic with regards to getting a top 4 quarterback? Bears, Commanders, and Patriots will take a quarterback. Raiders and Vikings will be aggressive. We just don't have the luxury of trading a bunch of draft capital for the 4th best quarterback in the draft.
Yeah, we discussed this a little bit top of the pod, Jake, but I felt like Joe Schoen was pretty resigned in his pre-draft presser about this exact thing. And I think maybe we've been a little bit unrealistic about what the Patriots are going to do at 3. Maybe this whole time the Patriots are going to go quarterback. And I think we might find that play out. Bears and Commanders to me are locked in quarterback. And Joe Schoen's already admitted we can't trade with 2. We're not going to go in division. They're not going to go in division. So if Patriots take that quarterback, then yeah, we're down to, well, we would either have the luxury of trade. I see that's the part that I don't agree with though, Jake. I don't think anyone's trading up for the fourth quarterback unless it's Drake May. If McCarthy goes in those first 3 picks, then maybe. But I just don't buy the Raiders or Vikings giving up all these assets to move up for JJ McCarthy. And I really hope the Giants don't do that either, feel panicked to do that or, feel pressure to do that because it just I don't love the ceiling for McCarthy. I think there may be there's juice there. Like we liked him, we did the eval, but like trading all those assets for a prospect like McCarthy to me seems like a massive risk based on his frame and his arm talent. To be quite frank, so yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Nick?
I think the Vikings will trade up. I think the Vikings have put themselves into a position to trade up by getting that 23rd pick, 23 and 11 plus next year's pick. I think they want to trade up to get one of these quarterbacks. I just don't know which one specifically. It could be JJ, it could be Drake May. I don't know if that's with the Patriots. I think the Patriots, you look at their roster, they could use a lot, but yes, they need a franchise signal caller, right? So they could go quarterback. And then at that point, would the Vikings trade up for the fourth guy? But that fourth guy is either JJ McCarthy or Drake May, more than likely, right? Because Jane Daniels is probably going to go second. And I can see that happening. I think they position themselves to do so. Once the draft materializes and they see who's available, they might pull the trigger and possibly trade up before the New York Giants select at 6.
There's so many scenarios. It's going to be such a fun draft. I can't wait for it to all play out. Thank you to everybody tuning into the Big Blue Banter podcast. This is our third and final mailbag before the draft. Maybe we'll do some fun ones after to get your guys' thoughts on what's going on, what's happening. But a lot of content coming down the way. I don't know exactly when this is going to be released, but we got some good things planned for the final few days. Thank you so much for staying tuned throughout this whole process and supporting us. Have a great rest of your week or weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.